Hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this webinar today. Today we will be discussing MYOB Advanced, in particular the Manufacturing Edition. We ran a webinar around the general functionality of MYOB Advanced a few weeks ago, and if you're interested in seeing some of the more day-to-day functionality or user experience features, then please head over to our website and sign up for an on-demand copy of that webinar. It is only 30 minutes and you can watch it at your own time. I am Juanita Potgieter and I look after sales and marketing here at Verde, and I'm going to be your host and moderator today. This webinar should be around 40 minutes, and we will start by giving you a quick overview, and then we'll move on to a demo, and then at the end we'll have some questions and answers. Throughout the call, however, you don't have to wait until the end to submit your questions. You can go ahead and use the chat function at any time, and any questions that we are not able to answer live on the call because of timing, we will make sure to reach out to you afterwards. So with that and our limited time, let's get right into it. MYOB Advanced was introduced into the Australian and New Zealand market in 2014 as the first true cloud ERP solution built for the ANZ marketplace. We currently have over 1,000 sites in Australia and New Zealand. But MYOB Advanced is actually a localized version of an international piece of software called Acumatica. Now, MYOB have the rights to regionalize Acumatica for the ANZ space, and as such, they've rebranded Acumatica as MYOB Advanced. It's good to understand that Acumatica is currently seen as the fastest growing ERP vendor, and they already have over 6,500 customers. The benefit, of course, for our current and future customers is that Advanced will continue to evolve in line with global requirements. It is important to understand that MYOB Advanced is a fully integrated ERP solution. So everything is integrated in one solution, from finance to inventory management, customer management, sales and purchasing, project accounting, field service management, and then of course the MYOB Advanced Manufacturing Edition. Now, Advanced is 100% browser enabled. It is built for the cloud. It runs on any device using any browser. So whether you're accessing it from your phone or a tablet or a desktop, as long as you have access to the internet, you have access to your data that sits within MYOB Advanced. But let's have a look now at the MYOB Advanced Manufacturing Edition specifically. There are really three core modules of the Manufacturing Edition: Bill of Materials and Routing, Material Requirements Planning, and Production Planning. So for the Bill of Materials, it allows you to manage the definition of a product, so what it is made of and how it is made. It also serves as the framework for the rest of the other modules in the system. Material requirements planning ensure that the production meet demands and that the materials needed to manufacture products are available. And with production management, you control and track the manufacturing processes and manage the schedules to meet delivery dates. So with these three core modules, you can run your manufacturing process end to end. Now, let's look at each one in a little bit more detail. So as I mentioned, bill of materials and routing lists down the components of a product. It also sets the correct proportions to build a particular product. It also allows you to link these components to specific production operations. And for each of those operations, you can define steps and instructions to give to your staff on the manufacturing floor. Another important feature of this is that it is able to roll up costs for inventory for the tools that you use, for the machines that you use, and for other overheads that you define. So you ensure that the end product that you have has had all the correct costs assigned to it. You are also able to maintain multiple revisions for a BOM. So this means that if you have any design changes to your product, it all gets tracked through that particular BOM. It also works on multiple levels. So this means that the individual components that your BOM can have also have their own corresponding parts. The production management module is the module that manages your actual manufacturing process. So you're able to schedule your production orders to ensure that you meet your supply demands. With this module, we can track the actual labor and the actual materials that you spent during your production. It also does backflashing, so this just automates that step. We recognize your materials and your labor so that you don't have to manually enter them into the system each time. It also includes the ability to identify the critical materials that you need for production, so ensuring that materials are procured in time for you to meet your target production dates. It integrates with lot and serial tracking across the whole process. So this means that from your raw materials all the way to your finished goods, you can have lot and serial tracking. It also keeps an audit trail of every event that happens during the production run, so it's easy for you to go back and see what went wrong for a particular run and what you can improve on. The MRP serves as the smarts of the operation, so it calculates the required quantities of finished goods you need to produce and the raw materials that you need to produce them. It does this by taking input from your current stock levels, your sales orders, and your demand forecasts. It also integrates at multiple levels of the BOM, so you can go from the finished good down to the subassembly down to the raw materials. You also have the ability to select whether items that are suggested by your MRP should be purchased or produced internally. The system can also provide you with suggestions of where you can transfer stocks from. So if you have a higher demand in some warehouses, you can move stocks from those that have many of them. Now, let's go into a little bit more detail of how the MRP process looks like. So again, it takes it from the different inputs like your forecasts, sales orders, what you have on hand, and even the purchase orders that are coming in. And it does its calculations to determine what the final number of material is that you need to have. Then once that number is produced, you have the option to produce them in the case of products that you're actually selling or purchase them in the case of materials needed for production. Other than those three core modules, we also have more advanced modules within the Manufacturing Edition. One of them is an engineering change management. So this allows you to incorporate an approval process for when you make changes to the BOM. We also have an estimating tool that allows you to set up an estimate for custom products that you sell to your customers. We also have a product configurator, which allows you to set different specifications for a product that you sell. And finally, we have an advanced production schedule. So this allows you to optimize the scheduling of your production orders, taking into consideration the capacity of the machines and the staff that you have available. Now, let's go to the different business processes that we can execute within the manufacturing modules. So this is probably the simplest one, made to stock. So in this scenario, you just want to replenish your inventory and produce as and when you need it. We also have the ability to make to order products within the system. So from your sales order, you can trigger a production order that produces the final good. You also have the alternative to use a product configurator. So before you confirm your sales order, you can set the different specifications for that product and base your production order on it. And again, the production order itself will draw the information from the bill of materials that you've created. You're also able to implement an estimate to order process. So for this one, it works in conjunction with the CRM system. So when you get an opportunity for a cost of build from a customer, you can set up an estimate and use that as a basis for your sales order. Then from there, you follow the same process of creating a production order, and then you can go to the finished goods and process as you would any sales order. Now that I've introduced the manufacturing module, let's dive into a demo of the actual system. Let me just change my screen here. Now, as MYOB Advanced is a cloud-based system, you can access it from anywhere at any time. Now, I'm already logged in here, and if you look at the menus on the left there, you will see all the standard menus that we have within MYOB Advanced. And if you watched our Advanced Overview webinar, you would have seen how customizable all these menu items are. But notice now that we have a few new menu items that form part of the Manufacturing Edition. So before we go into the actual transactions and processes that are involved in manufacturing, let me just first recap the core or primary modules within the Manufacturing Edition. So the first one would be the bill of materials. So this way you define what materials are needed to produce a finished good. This is also where you set up the routing. Essentially means just what work centers and what operations a particular finished good needs to go through to be produced. The next one would be materials requirements planning, or MRP. So again, this is what helps you plan what finished goods you need to produce to meet your demand from your sales orders and your forecasts. It also helps you determine what raw materials you'll need then to purchase to support the production of these goods. The last one would be production order. So this is really where you manage the process of manufacturing. So on here, you can control the movement of your stocks to and from the manufacturing area. You'll also be able to enter the actual labor hours that you spend for manufacturing. We also have the option of performing what we call backflashing, so that when you complete a particular production order, it automatically consumes the inventory for you and enters the labor hours for you as well. So all of those costs will automatically be incorporated to your finished goods. Now let's look at them one by one. So first I'd like to show you an example of a BOM. So again, the BOM is the main piece of master data for your manufacturing module. And here is an example of one for a laptop computer that we will be selling in this scenario. Before we go into the detail of the BOM, I'd like to note here that the manufacturing module caters for both standard and average costed items in the system. So regardless of what you're using, you should be able to handle the correct accounting for that particular item. We also use lot and serial tracking across all the processes. That means the items that are part of the BOM in the finished product itself, which is very important for highly regulated industries where, for instance, you have a recall, you need to identify the specific part that was put into a specific finished good. We also have the ability to track revisions of the BOM within the same document. So if you have any changes to the design of the product, if you change any of the components, or you change how you produce them, you can keep track of it using the same document. You have the ability as well to use the engineering change management module for the BOM. So with that, you can incorporate an approval process before you make any changes to the design. This again is very important for businesses that are highly regulated industries where you need to go through a stringent process before you can change anything in the design. Now let's discuss a little bit of the routing. So the middle section that you see there is what we call the routing for the product. So this shows all the operations or all the steps that it needs to go through to be produced. So for each one, you can define the different setup and run times and factor into the scheduling of your production as well. And each of them will be linked to a specific work center. A work center in the system can pertain to a step in your assembly line or a section in your workshop. And this is just a way for you to manage the different defaults in the system that are automatically set when using those work centers. So if you click on an example of a work center here, we can see what is available. The first one, if you look at the top right there, we can see that you can set it to automatically backflash both labor and materials. This just means that once you complete the step for that work center, it's going to automatically transact the inventory and labor transactions. You can also maintain multiple shifts on here for the same work center, and for each shift, you're going to send different crew sizes so you can manage the scheduling based on this as well. You can also set an efficiency, so this just means that you set a certain factor for when you complete the production. So if it's less than 100% efficiency, the system will know that it's only going to be able to produce a certain amount. You can also set different schedules for each of the shifts. So you can assign them different calendars and assign the labor components so to determine the labor costs. You can assign overheads as well that will automatically be defaulted. I don't have any of them set here, but if you wanted to, you can. You can also assign machines. So the machines are just the different equipment that you use for production. So on here, you can maintain multiple machines that you will use within that work center. And each one can have their own specific costs that can get rolled up to the total product itself. So if you wanted to view all of the BOMs that are referencing this particular work center, you can just go to the Where Used tab, and this just lists all the items that you produce that need to go through this work center to be manufactured. We also have the concept of substitute work centers. So if a certain work center is not available for you, then you can use a different work center to produce that same product. So let's expand our operations here to see the materials for this operation. You can see that we have the set of materials that we put into the overall product. And if you open up a different one, you can see a different set of materials. So as you go through each process, you define what you add to the finished good. So on here, you also assign the proportions of the quantities that you brought into that product. So if you're using more than one of the inventory item in your product, you have to define it here. An important component to it is the cost as well. So for you to determine the actual cost of the finished good that you're producing, you need to be able to identify the cost of each material, and that just takes it from the inventory record of the item. You're also allowed to define steps for each operation, so this can be viewed by people in the production floor themselves or be printed out in a production ticket to be sent out so they know what step-by-step process are within the operation. A unique feature that we have is the ability to incorporate the cost of tools. So this is aside from the machines that are there more static, that are in your manufacturing floor. So even the smaller tools that you use, you can incorporate that into the overall costing of your product. So you can define how many hours you're going to be using it, or if it's consumables, a specific quantity in each of which will have a specific cost. On the bill of material itself, you also are able to assign the overhead. So if you notice, we didn't put it on our work center, but you can still put it on the bill of materials. So this is going to be specific to this build. So overhead is just any expense that you incur that you want to add for your production. And if you click on it, we can show the different ways that we can incorporate that in terms of our costing. So you have the ability to put in a fixed amount, or you can have it changed based on the quantity that you produce, or proportion it out based on the quantity, or spread it out based on the number of hours you want. So you can also define different cost rates for them and assign specific accounts that you want to post the expense to. So really quite flexible. So in summary, the BOM allows you to consider all of the costs associated into producing your product, so that it includes labor and material costs, the machine and costs, and the costs from your tools and overheads that you maintain as well. That is important because it allows you then to put in an accurate margin on your products when you sell them. You're also able to manage how you produce the product, so define the different steps that are associated to it and the different instructions that come with them. You're also able to manage provisions for the BOM and even integrate an engineering change management process. So next I'd like to talk to you about MRP. So for that, let's go to the transaction that actually does the calculations for us. So what this does is it looks at the demand for your finished goods. So this can be replenishment settings, open sales orders, and your forecasts, and compares that to what you currently have in stock and determines then what you need to produce. Now, the forecast can be uploaded manually, or you have the alternative of generating those forecasts based on the historical sales figures that you already have in the system. And that's what we'll look into next. You can see here that I can easily just open a separate tab, and if we open this transaction, I can see here that I have different settings on how I want to change my forecast. First, date, and then you can also set the seasonality for it. So you have the ability to maintain different seasonalities in the system. So if you have certain products that have lean months and others that have strong months, you can incorporate that into your forecasting and have the system adjust the forecast based on that. You have the option also to determine how you want to break it down. So in this case, I have it on a monthly basis, and the system shows me the different quantities that I expect to sell. Now, to just go back here to the regenerate MRP, I just want to discuss a little bit further and explain how the system determines the full list of your MRP outputs, meaning the finished goods all the way to the raw materials by breaking down the information gathered from the BOM. So you know we have the different levels, so it goes from the finished goods down to the sub-assemblies and then further down to the raw materials. Now, all of this is important because for many manufacturers, you don't have visibility on what you actually need to produce and how much you have in stock to produce products. So what happens is that you end up with overstocked materials or shortages. By the way, you can schedule the screen so you can run this in the background outside of office hours as well. The next thing I'd like to get into is how we display the results of the MRP run itself. So it's done through this screen, and you can see it is suggesting to us the different items that we're going to need. Now, the great thing we have about a screen like this is that it still allows you some form of manual intervention before you do commit to what you're going to do next. And as I mentioned, for each item, you have the option of either purchasing it or manufacturing it. We are also, though, able to maintain a default setting for an item. So if you want to automate that step, just set it correctly on the item and then just select it and then execute your results. We have the ability to transfer stocks from one warehouse to another. So let's say if the demand for one warehouse can be fulfilled from another warehouse, it's just a matter of clicking on transfer and moving those stocks to the other warehouse. So now that we've discussed our BOM and MRP, we can dive into how we then manage our production. Now to do that, we'll need to open an example of a production order, and here is one that I created earlier. This is for the same item that we were using the BOM for earlier. And as you can see, like many transactions in advance, the header here is where, what, and when of the whole transaction. So this is where you indicate the item that you're going to be producing, when you're planning to manufacture it, which warehouse are going to be manufacturing it, and select the specific location within that warehouse where you're going to be receiving the stocks afterwards. Of course, you'll be able to assign the quantity that you need to produce, and that works back with our BOM. So from this quantity, the system is able to determine what quantities of raw materials and sub-assemblies you'll need. If you factor in the use of machines and overheads based on the quantity, it will take this number in as well. Now, you also have the ability to influence how you schedule the production orders. So you can choose whether to start up on the date that you indicate or choose to have it completed on that day. So that second option is especially useful when you're trying to meet a due date for delivery. So if you wanted to target a specific date to have it ready for delivery, you can set that date and then the system will automatically identify what day you need to start the production on it. The next thing I'd like to cover is the different transactions that we can link to a production order. So in this scenario, we're making to stock, meaning we're just looking to replenish what we have in our warehouse currently. So we're not referencing that this particular production order to any other transaction. And if you look at our sales order references here, it is blank because it's not linked to any particular sales order that we need to deliver. In any scenario, though, you need to have a BOM related to your production order, so the system automatically determines this for your inventory item, and if you have a specific BOM revision that you have selected. Now, this is very important because it allows you then to go back to your production order in case you have any issues with the product and look at which version of the product you were actually producing. You can also link a production order to a project, and in fact, you can even generate production orders out of a project. Now, this feature is especially helpful for businesses like furniture manufacturers or equipment manufacturers that, aside from producing the products themselves, charge customers for the installation into the office or into the factory. Now, by using projects, you'll be able to track all of the costs coming in from the labor when you install it and from the production and consolidate that into a single accounting entity. And it works not just for cost, you can do that for your work in progress as well, and when you generate your revenue out of your invoices. So again, it's an easy way to keep track of the whole engagement in a single document. The production order also has the ability to keep track of all the events and transactions that happen for it. So if we go to the event history on here, we can see the different transactions that have been posted against it. So this includes the inventory transactions, meaning the movement of inventory to and from our production floor, all the labor transactions as well, and the accompanying cost transactions of those two. If you look at the transactions I have here, you can see that they all happen fairly simultaneously, and that is because if you remember the BOM that we're using accepted backflush. So this means that when we completed the production order, all of the transactions were posted automatically for me. If I were doing it manually, I would see the step by step on here, and that's useful because if there are any delays, you can always just go back to the event history and identify what caused those delays. Now, like many transactions in MYOB Advanced, you can use attributes for production orders. Attributes are fully configurable. You can use them for any purpose you want. In this case, I use it to signify the trade of the product that I'm going to be producing. And since it's configurable, you can have as many of them as you want on a particular production order and have predefined settings for each one as well. Now, another important feature of the production order is the ability to track totals. So if you go into our totals tab here, we can see that we have three different columns. The first one is planned column, the actual, and the variance. So the planned column just draws it from its data from the BOM itself. So it shows you what your expected labor hours are with the cost of the materials and the other overheads and machine costs. Now, the actual is what you actually generate from your production order, and then the variance compares those two and gives you the difference. Now, this is very important at two different levels. First one is, while the production is ongoing, you should be able to immediately identify if something's going wrong. So in the longer sense, you can also use data from here to determine the accuracy of your BOM. So if you're noticing that a lot of your production runs are not hitting the target, you can always go back and revise your BOMs and make it more realistic. Now let's drill down and look at the details of this production order. So if we look at the screen here, you might think that it looks very similar to the one for the BOM. That would be correct. And again, that's because the production order just draws its data from the BOM. You can see on here all the operations that are involved in producing this particular finished good. All the materials as well that you require to produce it. The only real difference is that it shows the actuals from the production. So the actual hours that you spent to produce the product, the actual amount of product or materials that you used to produce it, and what you actually ended up producing. So while it's not completed, you can see as well the quantity that's remaining to be produced, and in a case where the finished product is broken after production, you have the ability to scrap it and reconfigure how that's going to be treated in your accounting. Another important feature of the production order is the ability to identify critical materials. So these are materials that you need for production and is usually something that is covered by MRP. But in this scenario where you don't use the MRP module, or let's say you're trying to manufacture something that's out of the MRP cycle, you can use this particular screen. So if it's like a production order here, it still requires material. I can see all of the components of that item. And here it shows me what I have on hand, what I need, and what I still have short. So from here, similar to the MRP screen, I have the option of selecting the items and choosing whether I purchase them or manufacture them in the case of sub-assemblies. So really, what it allows you is the ability to supply the materials that you need for production in a timely manner. Like in other aspects of your business, the primary driver for an organization to use a system for their manufacturing is the ability to report on its performance. So in this regard, the manufacturing module of the MYOB Advanced system is fairly similar to the other modules, and it comes out of the box with quite a lot of reporting options. One example here is this one for production order performance, which provides you with a screen similar to the one that you see on the totals tab of the production order, except that it shows you the data for all the production orders that you have in the system. So this is one way of presenting it, and as you all probably know, reports in MYOB Advanced is very configurable, and you can present them in different ways, like this one where it's more of a static report, but you can also show it in a form of generic inquiry or on a dashboard that allows you to see immediately what you need to know at any given time. So now that you see the different features of the manufacturing module, let's see how those interact with the other modules in the system in order to handle end-to-end processes. So I will open an example for sales order. So again, this is a regular sales order in the system. The only difference is that for the first line item here, I have selected it for production. So it's as easy as that to link it to a production order. It's just a matter of ticking it for production, and then the system generates a production order for me for that line item. Again, the information here is drawn from the BOM, and if I go into my references, I can see that it's automatically then linked to my sales order in that particular line item. So this is useful, especially when you have to recall certain items or items that are returned to you by the customer for defects. That means that since you know what production order created a product that you sold on the sales order, you can easily go back to see what went wrong during the production. Another option that when we're selling items is to use configurable items. So these are for products that have specs. If I click on the configure button here, it's going to show me all the specs that I have available for that item. It is rule-based, so you can design rules around the different specification so that only certain specifications can work with others. So take, for example, this. If I select the spec for 4 gigabytes of RAM, it automatically removes the other specs. So it's a foolproof way for people to enter sales orders so you don't have to be involved with the design of the product or part of the manufacturing team to enter it. We can pre-configure the rules so that anyone who's entering sales orders can do it. All of the costs in all of the pricing gets filled up as well. So if I click on a different spec here, you can see that the price changes. So again, none of that information is lost. All your costings and pricing will be accurate and you don't have to do anything else. We also have the option of using estimates. Now, these are for more complex ones that actually needs to be designed by your estimating team. But the same principle follows. You create the estimate, link it to the production order, and you create the sales order. So with that, this concludes the demonstration part of the manufacturing edition, and I'll now open up to some questions and answers. We are starting to run slightly over time. Let me just have a look here at the first question. Is the product configurator dimensional? Yes, it is. I assume by dimensional you mean something like formula based or where we need to enter dimensions. So for example, here's a custom height or custom width of this door or window. Can we come up with the dimensional materials requirements from there? And the answer is yes, we do support those types of formulas. It completely includes and excludes rule-based and supports the pricing roll-up. So yeah, you won't have any issues with dimensions in our product configurator. The next question, can you include sales forecasts in the replenishment suggestions? Yes, we can, but it also depends on where that sales forecast is coming from. If you're doing sales forecast in something like Excel and you want to upload that into Advanced, that's just fine. But we also have the ability for you to generate your sales forecast in our ERP and then send that over to the replenishment suggestion. It can be dependent or independent of sales orders. So yes, it doesn't matter where that forecast is coming from, we can bring that into our replenishment. There's a few more questions on the line, and I will reach out to each one of you individually afterwards. But before we end, I would just like to go through the key points that I would like you to take away from this webinar. So first is that with the manufacturing edition, you are going to be able to monitor and streamline your manufacturing process. So within that production order process, there are a lot of ways that you can automate certain steps so that you can be as efficient as possible. You're also going to be able to determine the actual cost of products. And this is very important because knowing that will allow you to put the correct margin on your products. You will also be able to produce enough finished goods to support your demand and do this in a timely manner as well. So you'll never be missing out on opportunities to sell because you don't have items on hand. And since the manufacturing edition is not a standalone system, it incorporates the rest of the ERP system, you'll be able to translate your whole business process from end to end within MYOB Advanced. And finally, with the reporting and dashboard capabilities, you'll always be able to track the performance of your manufacturing in your plan. With that, I would like to thank all of you for joining us for today. That is about all we have time for. I will get back to everyone that have raised questions here. If you are interested in seeing more of MYOB Advanced, please head over to our website and access some of our other on-demand webinars. If you are keen on having a discussion on how we can help you and your business, please reach out to our sales team. Thank you all for joining today, and we look forward to picking up discussions with you. Cheers.